We are live, I think, and thank you to everyone who has been patiently waiting. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with the co-creator of this stream, the Dictators. This is my dear friend David Dobato. If you're not following his channels, goodness, what are you doing with your lives? We're going to put those links in the description of the video. He's got a fantastic Substack, fantastic channel. He is far more authoritative on, I would say, the authoritarian slide that's happening in the US. No less impassioned than I am, but it relates far more directly because it is your country, it is your republic, is your democracy being corrupted by the orange criminal. And of course, we're talking today because he has launched something which he promised never to do, told his MAGA supporters there'd be no more foreign wars. Well, we might be seeing one of the largest of those kick off in recent history. I've been out all day. I've just trying to bring myself up to speed. David is been assiduously watching the news feeds all day long. But we're going to dive in. David, welcome.
Thank you very much for the intro. And for those of you watching, I just want to apologize up front. I had no inside information that this war was going to kick off today, but I kind of had a feeling. And having said that, I've been up about 24 hours. So I apologize if I look any more tired or stupid than normal or uninformed, because it's been a long night and day. But hey, we're at war again. The fact of the matter is, Jonathan, we're at war. When I say we, specifically the United States of America and Iran, that doesn't mean that other nations aren't going to be dragged into it. Some of them already are. But as you said, the peace president, in fact, don't we have a new international peace organization of which he is the permanent chairperson? So the peace president,
which bears not a little resemblance to Spectre and James Bond. I mean that's what that reminds me of, but a sort of clown version of Spectre. But
well,
anyway,
yeah,
the
a clown version, a period, the orange clown. But yeah, the peace president, look, has launched a war. And for those of you, not you specifically, that are watching this live stream, but I've listened to a lot of pundits today. From all over the world, and especially American pundits are trying their best not to call this a war. They're just trying to call it strikes, incursion, whatever. Let me be very clear, folks. This is a war. How long this war will last, no one knows. This is not a sanctions war, though, because as we're going to get into, Jonathan, President Trump did not go before Congress. He did not get any permission from any governmental body to launch this war. In fact, he kept it secret from everyone, including the American people, until about, I think it was 1 or 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time when he launched these attacks. And I just want to say this one thing, and I'll let you expand on that. As many of you know, Trump delivered what's known as the State of the Union address Tuesday night here in the United States. He gave the longest State of the Union address ever. It was full of nothing. But one of the things it was also not full of, because it wasn't mentioned, was the impending attack or war on Iran. He didn't even give an inkling to the American people that he was taking his country into a war in the Middle East. It's unconscionable. But then again, Donald Trump is known for his unconscionable acts. And I'm going to take a brief break so I can get some adrenaline going here, and I turn it over to Jonathan.
I'm not an expert on this, but I put out an episode this afternoon. It does seem there are a series of processes. There are a series of sort of mandated steps that a president has to go through. And one of those steps will occur, I think, in the next 48 hours. He has to come and inform the legislature of the actions he's taken and why he's taken them. I wonder if he'll show the same contempt as he's shown on other occasions. That will be, of course, interesting, and we can perhaps predict the result of that. But then there's a countdown, then there's a certain period, I think it's a 60-day time scale, where essentially he loses the power to continue war unless it is mandated by the legislature and so on. So yeah, maybe you can talk about the actual process there. I was perhaps a little surprised, and we'll get into this, maybe not, but a little surprised that actually Iran is lashing out at its neighbors. That seems to me a desperate move. It suggests the regime loathes its neighbors actually and realizes perhaps how loathed it is in turn. But the sight of drones crashing into, I think it was a block in Dubai near the tourist area, that ain't going to be good for tourism, obviously, and that is probably the point behind it. But also, someone said to me, sort of privately, he said, "Well, maybe the world is finally going to wake up to what Iran has been doing in Ukraine for 4 years now, which is helping Russia to send these terrifying munitions of destruction and death into tower blocks in Kiev. Maybe finally more people wake up and go, oh, I see, right. This is actually quite scary and serious. Um, I wonder, possibly. Because, of course, the media is going to be all over this in a way they perhaps have not been all over the Ukraine story since the terrorist attacks in Israel.
Well, let me make one of my very rare defenses of what Donald Trump did as far as not reporting this to Congress or going before Congress. Look, we have a long history in the United States, unfortunately, of chief executives, the president, not going before Congress as he's supposed to get permission to launch attacks on foreign nations. We had a little known war, you might have heard of it, called Vietnam. We've had many other, what many people call wars, but actually were military actions since World War II, many of which were never reported to Congress beforehand and received permission to launch these attacks. Now, granted, the president has wide abilities, has a lot of power to do many things in terms of foreign affairs and foreign relations. And he is the commander-in-chief of the military. He can order the military to go and do pretty much anything within the law. But you are correct. He is supposed to get the permission of Congress to launch a war. Of course, the Republicans, MAGA, is not calling this a war. I think they're going to call it a special military operation. I think that might be very good since his
they are calling it a special combat operation. I mean,
well,
this is
go. Now, where might he have gotten that phrase, Jonathan? I'm not quite sure. I just want to say this at the outset.
It's horrific. The parallel is horrific.
I want folks to ask us questions. I mean, I really do. I want people that are interested in this to ask us anything they want so we can try to respond on air. But what I wanted to get in right at the top is how can I say, all of the munitions, all of the high-tech modern munitions that are being used right now in Iran by the American military. It's no secret that we are not as up to date as we can in terms of replenishing our stockpiles. That was one of the excuses that first President Biden used, and then officials in the Trump administration used for not supporting Ukraine with enough munitions, missiles and bombs and ammunition and so forth. So we suddenly came up with all kinds of munitions to bomb the hell out of Iran. And that's another sore point, Jonathan. We have some very credible sources saying that we are going to run out of some of these very expensive and critical munitions within the American military stockpiles if this war goes on for more than really a few weeks. We're going to start to run really low. The heck with Ukraine in terms of helping them, helping ourselves. We're going to be running out of our own stockpiles. It's just insane. And I want to ask those that are watching, and if you want to answer the question for me, what is the goal of this war? Originally, it was supposed to be to stop Ukraine from obtaining enriched uranium in which to make a nuclear bomb, several nuclear weapons. I've been hearing that for, I don't know, at least 30 years, Jonathan, that we had to take drastic measures against Iran because they were always within about a week of being able to enrich uranium in order to make a nuclear weapon. 25 or 30 years. Also, back in last year, I think it was June, where we, the United States, attacked Iran, bombed the heck out of them again. And what was the word, Jonathan? Obliterated. We obliterated their military and specifically their nuclear weapons program. But then last week, I think it was Donald Trump, might have been Hegseth or both of them, said that Iran is again within 1 week of making nuclear weapons. So we've got to go back. I'm confused.
Maybe either they exist or they don't. And I think it's fair to say that Iran is trying to develop these things. I mean, I think that has been quite clear for many, many years, but that actually having a functioning device could now be years away, especially if we believe, what Trump says about the strikes. Although I hear various sources to say those strikes were not nearly as effective for various reasons, including the Russians may well have been tipped off to help Iran get some of that stuff to safety. Now, that's just a rumor. It's not confirmed, of course, but there's a lot more behind the scenes with that. But if the devices are years away, then yes, if a nuclear threat was imminent, then actually there is some recourse in the US sort of legal framework to take actions like these. There actually is. But as that threat goes further out in time, those legal arguments fall apart. So if the threat is potentially many months or even many years away, you cannot use those statutes around imminent threat to US interests, US lives. So it seems they are on very shaky ground. What it strikes me is that they actually don't care about the legalities. For the first time,
you're kidding.
In my
the
lifetime,
Trump administration doesn't care about the law. Surely you jest.
No, what the irony of that? Extraordinary. What strikes me is that it's the first time in my lifetime that the US, and we can argue about the rights and wrongs of various US actions, but it has always sought at least to move with some allies in place. In Iraq, in the first Gulf War, it had many allies on side. In the second, it also had many allies, and indeed, the British, again, you can argue the rights and wrongs of this, you can argue the rights and wrongs of the intelligence dossiers that led to those, but the US was at pains to bring allies along with it. And where it could, some international institutions, you can say that, it turned out that evidence was either knowingly or unknowingly really not sufficient and didn't prove what it said it proved. These things need to be debated still, especially if violent actions. But this is the first time where the US is proceeding in a unilateral fashion, and it has no care whatsoever whether it brings any allies with it or not, and that includes allies in the Middle East. That seems to me an incredibly dangerous and potentially very costly scenario it could get into, because if this goes south, if this starts to suck up resources and so on, the US is on its own to deliver those. And as one of the comments, I think it's quite far now, I popped it on the screen. If indeed the Ayatollah has been killed, well, this is a hydra. The Iranian regime is a hydra that will grow more heads, as has been pointed out. The US is going to have to make damn sure that it chops all of those heads off and destroys the snake, because if it leaves any part of that body intact of the Iranian regime, then it has just created a monster that is going to repeatedly come back to try to bite it and bite it and bite it and damage his interest. So now Trump has moved, he better move swiftly to root that regime out. I don't think, however, there is the strategic planning to do that. I don't think again, Trump regime, strategic planning. You'll tell me, what am I even thinking of? But if they go into something like this, and they were sensible, then they would have perhaps made some plans around contingencies for just such this. They would have made contingencies to rip the regime out root and branch and help the Iranian opposition do some genuine state building. Well, I don't believe any of that preparation or thought will have gone into this. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, let me say about, the Iranian regime, in case anyone gets the wrong impression, I may be against how and when the Trump administration pursued this war. But make no mistake, I don't like the Iranian regime. I don't like the Ayatollah and the Ayatollahs. Khomeini especially. I was on active duty because I'm old enough to remember 1979 and the Iranian hostage crisis, where the Ayatollahs, the revolution in Iran, where they took over the U.S. embassy for 400 and some days, over a year, and they held them hostage. I remember all of that. And then since then, it's gone downhill, really. So I am no fan of the Iranian regime since 1979. Not that I was thrilled about the Shah, but he was a heck of a lot better than what came after him. Having said that, I feel kind of the same way, Jonathan, as I do about enforcing the American immigration laws. And I've said this on your podcast and on live streams. I am all for almost closing the border. I am for strict immigration enforcement in the United States of America. I do not want illegal aliens or undocumented immigrants in this country. I'm sorry. Call me a conservative on that. But why am I saying that? Because there's ways to enforce immigration laws correctly, legally, and humanely. And there's ways of dealing with a regime like Iran, short of carrying out in my opinion, a misguided and perhaps unplanned war with Iran. I have a quote here very quickly. Yesterday, the Omani foreign minister, Badr al-Busaidi, I'll probably mispronounce his name, was on Face the Nation, which is a weekly news program here in the States. And he was talking about how he, as the chief negotiator between Iran and the United States, was within 24 hours, in his opinion, of reaching a deal, as Trump would say, a peace settlement with Iran and the United States, where they agreed to not enrich any more uranium in order to make nuclear weapons, but to downgrade it. And he listed the process. I'm not a nuclear scientist, obviously. So it would only be good for making power, energy, in their nuclear power plants. He was about to announce that yesterday after the meeting between Iran and the United States, which would have avoided this war, in his opinion. Again, remember, he was the chief negotiator for the United States and Iran. So 24 hours before an alleged agreement, which would have stopped any attack on Iran, Trump launches a war on Iran. At this point, I have to say that this is definitely because of the Epstein files. I think everyone knows this, everyone, including Trump. And it's a disgraceful way to try to protect his ass, not only by sacrificing untold numbers of Iranians and residents of the surrounding countries, but of American military service men and women, to protect Donald Trump, who apparently, according to the latest revelations, credible revelations, raped a 13-year-old girl, perhaps 12-year-old girl, and threatened to murder her, among other new
this has been alleged by
coming
a
out of
US
the Epstein
congressman.
files.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't an allegation we're making. This has been alleged by an American congressman.
Well, there's been several congressmen and women,
yeah.
Jonathan, who have finally been able to read some of the unredacted files in the Epstein files. And they, not just that one congressman, I believe from California, have seen this evidence. And it's coming from both sides, Republican and Democrat. So we're dealing with someone who raped children.
Again, in the files, let's be clear. Let's be clear, for legal reasons. It is alleged. An allegation rather than evidence.
Yes.
But this is what they've said. Yeah. So
they are
alleging.
They are alleging that these facts are in the Epstein files. I, of course, haven't seen them. I don't think you have. But these congressmen and women have. And they've gone on the record of saying that they are there. In my opinion, that's why this war was launched, and I don't think I'm alone. I think I'm in the majority in that opinion. What think you?
These things deserve to be investigated, certainly, and the efficacy, the veracity of them demonstrated one way or another to the standard required for a court of law. There is clearly a process going on to hide things. So this is let's go through the scenarios of what's going on here. Why would Trump launch this war when clearly his MAGA position that he was elected under with J.D. Vance was no more of this sort of thing. Well, we've had quite a lot of this sort of thing. There are also, claims he's made or boasts he's made that they're going to do the same with Cuba, and there are several others. So I think this is part one of what I'm thinking of as a Third World War. But it's not like the first one or the second one. It's a realignment of power by blocs that are behaving increasingly like autocracies, imperial autocracies, and it's a realignment of countries that fall within their so-called sphere of influence. The Middle East is, it seems to me, an area that doesn't neatly fit into one sphere or another and has a lot of resources. So it is going to be a contested region. That's one explanation that actually this is, a spheres of influence realignment. And unlike the Second World War, which is clearly defined and people declare war on each other, this may be a set of conflicts that spark into existence over a long period while these empires assert their control. That's the big picture, I think, potentially there. But why is he specifically attacking Iran? Well, one, it's to distract from his internal political problems, the Epstein files, the upcoming election. That's, I think, you can quite clearly make that allegation. It kind of makes sense. It kind of wag the dog, but for real. The other allegation, of course, is that he needs a major war in order to implement. It's still illegal, but in order to implement what he wants, which is the massive gerrymandering, and actually not just gerrymandering of the election that's upcoming later in the year, but give him the excuse so that he can deploy the military, suppress his opponents, and use the war as an excuse to, gather emergency powers, which enable him to further gerrymander and suppress the electoral vote. There's also credible allegations around that, given some stuff that's come out in the last couple of days. That's the other scenario. The scenario no one's really talking about, but which I want to put on the table here, because all these could be true. All these could be true in parallel. It's not necessarily the case that this war has a single explanation. There may be several benefits that are perceived. The other one, of course, is that Russia has been freaking out in the last couple of weeks because the price of Urals crude has absolutely tanked. This is ripping a hole. This is ripping a new backside to Russia's war machine and their budget. The other explanation here is with the Straits of Hormuz shut down, Trump would, in this instance, act on behalf of Russia to help spike the oil price and fix Russia's economic problems, enabling it to continue the war through the year. If he was to achieve that result, however, he would have to cause an extraordinary confrontation, but not topple the regime. He would have to leave it in place and then have some kind of simmering conflict, a lengthy shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz, because a short shutdown would not do that. It would not achieve that result. You get a spike in oil price, but you wouldn't get a considerable shortage of oil production. If it's a simple spike, that's not going to lift Urals crude. It's not going to help the shadow fleet. It's not going to persuade Western governments to lift off and not challenge the shadow fleet so much. But if there is, and 20% of the world's gas and oil supply goes through these straits, if there was a considerable constrained supply, then unfortunately, I think many of our governments would lighten up on the re-exporting and the processing of Russian fuels and their purchase of those processed fuels, which are then sort of commingled with other oils. And this whole filthy trade, which powers Russia's war effort, could continue unabated. Now, what will happen in the next couple of days, I think, will attest to whether one or all of these reasons are there. The third one, however, requires him to do a Venezuela scenario, which also fits with his extreme timidity, cowardice, and lack of strategy, which is to poke the hornet's nest, but not destroy the nest. Leave the hornets in place, just extraordinarily angry. That, of course, is the most dangerous scenario also for American servicemen. That is likely to result in more casualties rather than a swift decapitation of the regime. If that is indeed Trump's plan, it is the most cynical of them, and it is the most damaging and potentially the most harmful to American lives.
Well,
and of
I
course
think you're
Ukrainian
right.
land.
No, I think you're right. I have heard recently, in the last several hours since this war was launched, that this may be done in if not in consultation, in agreement with the aims of Vladimir Putin. No secret that he is a strong supporter of Putin. He is well aware of the fact that, like you said, the price of oil is tanking. That is putting a real crimp in the Russian economy, which means the Russian war machine. But I want to say also at this point that right now, as of now, not tomorrow, but as of now, this is strictly an air campaign. And if anybody thinks that the America can pound Iran to the point of surrendering or regime change or having their people overthrow the government just by launching hundreds of precision munitions, they got another thing coming. It's not going to happen. In history, in the 20th century to the 21st century, strictly air campaigns have never changed regimes. We only have to go back as far as Nazi Germany and the air campaigns against Germany. The air campaigns alone did not defeat Nazi Germany. As everyone knows, it took 6 years in total of boots on the ground to grind down the Nazi regime. In fact, what's going on right now, the way this war was launched, it almost begs the Iranian people to rally around the flag, to rally around their Khomeini, their Ayatollahs, which is the exact opposite, of course, of what we want. Because, Jonathan, as you know, whenever any country is attacked by a foreign country, especially not unexpected, but in this way, they don't generally say, yes, we like being bombed. Please bomb us more. We're on your side. Eventually that may happen, but it usually results in the opposite. They rally around their country. Nationalism just takes off. And this is not going to
Possibly.
resolve in regime change,
I
at least not
wonder.
immediately.
I wonder in Iran though, because they've just come out of an appalling period
Yes.
where
Yeah.
it's alleged alleged that the Iranian regime has slaughtered tens of thousands of its own citizens.
True.
My friend this evening did a live stream, Greg Terry, where apparently he was able to live stream from an apartment in Tehran. He wasn't there, but obviously someone he knows was, and they stuck their phone out of the window, and all you could hear were people cheering and whooping. One assumes the information that the Ayatollah has actually been identified as killed. Now, I'm not sure
We don't know.
that
Yeah.
we have definitive proof of that yet, but there is more and more circumstantial claims that suggest that they may actually be true. I think his demise will be greeted with widespread joy
I
across
agree. Let me interject
Iran.
something, though, because I
Yep.
agree with you. But you know what turns that around immediately? When any country bombs schools, when they bomb
Well, that's
hospitals.
the other news today, isn't it?
Yeah, the other news of a girls' school being bombed and dozens of young school children, girls, being killed. When you kill innocents in schools and in hospitals and in nurseries and in libraries and malls and houses, that really turns the locals around, even if they hate their government. It's just a phenomenon, Jonathan,
And the
that's as
optics of
old
its
as war.
children. I'm going to
Yeah.
have to ask the question here because Trump can be blamed for making the decision. He could be blamed for not having the appropriate strategy. But actually, when it comes down to the tactical execution of this, one would have hoped that a competent military personnel would have actually had an executional plan independent of the regime. Now, in 4 years of war, Ukraine has sent, probably by now, thousands of drones into Russian territory to strike oil installations, pipelines, and so on. To my knowledge, there has not been a single incident of mass civilian loss of life in 4 years and thousands of strikes over incredible distances using, and let's face it, Ukraine does not have all of the data and the technology that is available, say, to the American military. How is it in a one-day campaign, a massacre of this absolute incompetence, and it's an obscenity? How is it in 4 years Ukraine has not done this, has assiduously avoided anything like this, and in one day either the Israelis or the US has caused a
Yeah.
horrific massacre.
Well,
How is that?
let me address a question that at least one viewer has posed, or a point, saying that this is all Iranian propaganda, that they staged this, that in fact this school was not hit. You know, there could be some credibility to that, but I also have to say, and I really mean this, mistakes in war, mistakes are made. Even in the most brilliantly planned war with the most precision guided weapons, mistakes will be made. Also, having said that, we know this about Hamas recently. They will purposely plant bombs, munitions, and bases underneath hospitals, underneath schools, and so forth. Does that mean we should bomb a hospital or a school just because we think there's a base there, or weapons or missiles? Of course not. But mistakes are made. I'm not saying this was a mistake, but if in fact it happened, yeah, it was a mistake. And I'm not ruling out that part of it may be propaganda. But from what I've seen, Jonathan, just from what I've seen on videos and read, this was a tragedy, is a tragedy. And it's horrific, but it happens. And I think I can't answer your question as to why it happened. I know you're alluding to the fact that this may not have been as well planned, or at least tactically there may have been some loose ends in this.
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
I don't know.
They've been marshalling resources for potentially many months now. So one would have thought that hopefully on the operational level there was, one doesn't expect these kind of plans from Hegseth or others.
Well, I was just going to say,
but
if you have Pete Hegseth micromanaging the tactical situation here and the tactical planning, which he probably did, I wouldn't put it past him to for any tragedy to happen in the next few days or weeks. I really mean that.
Yeah, and we of course have to wait for more validated information.
Yes.
It's not impossible that the regime would have planted potential false flags in hospitals and schools. But we await further information on that one. And unlike the BBC and others, when approaching certain tragedies in Gaza, we need to have a certain level of not detachment, that's the wrong word, but we need to have a certain level of skepticism until we're presented with
I want to say to toot not my horn, but the United States of America, in my opinion, has the very best military in the world. When I say best, I don't mean just lethality. I mean the best trained. Those guys are good, guys and girls, men and women. They are the best. And those pilots that go in, or those sailors that are firing on Iran, they do believe in a code of conduct. They are not going to be just saying, well, the hell with it, they're all bad, let's bomb them to hell and bomb. Who cares if we hit a school or a hospital? That's not the way it works with the American military. Not at all. Not at all. From the highest ranking admiral or general down to the lowest ranking seaman or soldier. So I pray that this doesn't happen much or at all in the future. And I also want to say my heart goes out to all the American servicemen and women who are serving in this war. Some of them probably against their will, although they get orders, they go. So they're going to serve to the best of their ability. And I just pray that the casualties are minimal. But Jonathan, there's going to be American military men and women that are going to be killed in this war.
Of course,
but the American public isn't ready for that. I don't believe.
No, we don't know what maritime drones. It's likely that airborne drones could be taken out by American maritime assets.
Yes.
But if they do have the equivalents of sea babies, if they do have maritime drones, we could see some considerable damage being done. If the Chinese decide that this is a good theater in which to test various equipment and hand it over to the regime, possibly via Russia, then we might see that as well. Maybe they have already done that. And here's another good point. Again, we don't know if there's any truth behind this, but this is a reasonable hypothesis as well, and that is that the rather crappy Russian anti-air systems may well have dropped down and hit the target. And then, of course, any propagandist will look at that and go, okay, we did that, but let's use it. Let's use it to pollute the informational sphere. We know that Russian missiles and anti-aircraft stuff is hitting their own apartment blocks and stuff all the time. I mean, this is, it is difficult for them to hush up. We've seen so many incidents where either their planes or their POV, or it's called, strike, their own people. Here's another one I'm going to throw to you. This is our dear friend here, Operator Starsky. And I think this is a fascinating hypothesis. Has Trump traded Iran for Ukraine with Russia? Because it seems that in recent statements, Russia seems to be hinting at, there was Lavrov, and there's some other statements that the Russians aren't particularly happy, because in the post-Alaska environment, it seems that they were promised Donbass or other things. And this is an interesting hypothesis here. One could also say, was Venezuela in some ways traded? Was Syria traded? Or not? We don't know. Was Russia simply incapable of defending its allies and assets? And in this instance, might they trade one of their core allies for something else? Like we said earlier, would they look at this and go, well, on the one hand, we don't want to lose one of the axis of evil pillars. We don't want to lose an ally that's provided us with the technology, and let's not forget that, with the technology for these shaheeds that have been killing hundreds and hundreds of Ukrainians. On the one hand, a monster like Putin might look at this. Well, on the one hand, we lose Iran as an ally. On the other hand, oil spikes up, and I get to carry on my war for another year. I mean, these are the kind of calculations which tyrants do not shrink from making.
Well, I want to address one thing first, is from a viewer here, and again, it's kind of reiterating what I said before: is why didn't the United States use at least some of the weapons that they're using right now in Iran and give them to Ukraine, who have been begging for these weapons for the last 4+ years? I think the answer to that, well, with Biden, it was just indecision, which is just unforgivable. With Trump, it's because he sides with Russia. He is siding with Russia against Ukraine. That's why he's withholding that. I agree. These weapons that are being used right now against Iran should be used for the defense of America, first of all, but some of them should have been given to Ukraine so they could win this war. In terms of what you said about Russia, that's very possible. Russia, contrary to the Western press, at least Western media, is not winning the war in Ukraine. They're not. They're grinding out meters every day at the cost of thousands. The latest estimates by credible sources are between 7,000 to 10,000 deaths, KIAs, per month. I'm sorry, per week in the war in Ukraine, and they're paying. They're using that or paying for those with those lives for literally meters. They still, Jonathan, don't have any more than 20% of Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, under Russian control after more than 4 years. So is it possible that some kind of a deal was made? Very much. I think Putin right now is he's not desperate, as opposed to a lot of the reports, but he is upset. He is reaching out. He is looking for alternatives because he knows he is actually running out of time. Again, contrary to the Western media, it is Russia who is running out of time. Ukraine actually has more time. Should Europe, NATO, give Ukraine the weapons that they need, they will outlast Russia because Russia's running out of people. I think, in fact, they're going to have a mass conscription call this year, Jonathan. I think Putin, against what he knows is probably going to be the anger of the Russian population, is going to announce a massive conscription, kind of like he did, 3 years ago, a year into the war, and perhaps larger. He's running out of men to serve in Ukraine.
And he is, and he's increasingly desperate. And the move to ban Telegram recently, I think Starlink and Telegram are two different decisions there. The Starlink is very much forced upon them, whereas the Telegram ban is something else. It is regime paranoia.
What do you think about Elon Musk doing that, cutting off Russia right now?
I think there's a couple of interesting things going on there. I mean, one is that the new Minister of Defense comes from the digital sphere. He comes from the sort of tech background. He therefore may have more understanding of how the tech oligarchy kind of works. He also probably has a much better understanding of the optics for brands like the one that Musk runs. Musk obviously has very little control over his mouth and his fascistic instincts, but when the share price tanks, he will be having pressure applied to him. He will have shareholders and others basically saying, look, you've got to dial this down because every time you open your mouth, we lose, 10,000 car sales or whatever it is. What I think happened here is that they were working on a whitelist for Starlink terminals. I'm not sure if they thought they could actually push that through, but they were probably working with Musk's team on it. But the moment when Russia strapped a Starlink to a drone so it could pursue a moving target, i.e. in real time, rather than just being kind of locked, loaded and sent to something, a fixed target, the optics of this, not for human life, because I don't think Musk really cares too much about that, but the optics for his brands, the optics for his market share, the optics for his future IPO, which apparently he's mulling, they're catastrophic. If your technology is being used to commit war crimes at scale, that's a step too far. So I think basically, as Russia always does, it overreached. It pushed its luck, and it's got an unexpected slap back. With the Telegram, this is, I think, more interesting in some ways because they understand, I think, very clearly that by cutting off Telegram and certainly suppressing it on the civilian front and throttling it potentially at the military front as well, they're doing considerable damage to their military effectiveness, their ability to learn from mistakes, their ability for not their civic society, but those who are supporting the war effort, under the watchful eye of the FSB, that breaks all of that communication. It also severely damages their propagandistic ecosystem that they've invested billions and billions of rubles in. The reason that they went for it must supersede all of those things combined. Therefore, it must be something incredibly serious, i.e. mass mobilization, or genuine fears that the regime is under some kind of internal threat, whether it be palace coup or whatever, or maybe combine those two, that yes, they need to do full mobilization or take some other drastic steps, and they're worried about the response that will cause. So this is an intensely sort of interesting, and of course we know from many Ukrainians we've spoken to that actually they've taken extraordinary advantage of this. Around 400 square kilometers of territory has been recaptured, and many Russian lines have been kind of run ragged as a result of that. So lots of interesting kind of stuff going on there. It shows that Musk, there are certain sensitivities, and if you find the right little button to press, you can get something out of that. Now, friends of mine will say, well, we're trying to do the same with the Trump regime. We're trying to do the same with people within that regime. This is where I think it gets interesting, because we've got this comment on the screen, MAGA now like war. Well, in fact, they don't. They actually don't. I mean, the majority, I think, if they were polled now, of MAGA would not necessarily be in favor of this. They'd be far more aligned with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's come out and basically said that Trump is a criminal and an absolute liar and has betrayed MAGA values. Another recent poll shared by Stephen Moore, who's a more traditional sort of Republican, how do you call it, sort of advocate, etc., for Ukraine. Lobbyist, I guess you'd also call him now as well. A recent poll shows that actually a majority, even of MAGA supporters, think that if Putin does not take peace seriously, then Ukraine should be armed and supported more. That is a majority of MAGA voters. So they don't all vote exactly how the caricature says, and I don't think they'll all be jumping up and down saying that war with Iran and the Middle East being set aflame is a lovely and marvelous thing because their orange demigod said so. I think many may actually look at this and go, yeah, I don't agree with the big orange guy on this one.
Couple of points that you mentioned I want to talk about a little further is Telegram. From the Russians that I talk to, your average, Russian, not elites or oligarchs or anything, they're pissed about the whole Telegram thing. Right now, I think Telegram's the most popular social media platform in Russia, and it's been throttled over the last several weeks and months. So it's been slowed down a lot, which has upset a lot of people. And now that it's probably going to be blocked entirely, is really have a lot of people upset because Russia, the Kremlin, is trying to force Russians to use this new piece of crap called Max, which is supposed to supplant all the media platforms, WhatsApp and VKontakte, which is still up, and Telegram. And the Russians don't like that. Why? For good reason. It's a piece of crap. It's not very user friendly or functional, and they are told flat out that they're being monitored. The FSB keeps tabs. It was developed by FSB coders. So whenever you go on this platform, they're going to be looking for keywords to get you. Basically, they're going to listen to everything you do. So the whole Telegram debacle is not going over very well inside of Russia. And just quickly on the Ukrainian thing and MAGA, I think, this is just my opinion, that Trump, who lashes out whenever he feels cornered, is throwing a piece of red meat to his fiercest MAGA supporters, the people that will do anything for him and that are the most violent, the militias, the people that stormed the Capitol on January 6th. He's throwing them red meat by attacking, by invading, by going to war with Iran, because there still is a sizable Iran war party within the United States, Congress, actually, within some really hardcore far right Republicans. So this is feeding directly into that. So what is he going to gain out of that? The support he might need for destabilizing the country and perhaps even the polling places in the upcoming election. He needs to hold on to his most fervent, strongest cult members come this fall. And I'm not saying that was the whole reason at all, but that is, I think, part of the reason that he also invaded Iran. It's red meat to his most hardcore supporters.
Yeah, and there are some who will just do whatever he says, who will lap up whatever he says, no matter how contradictory it is with his previous statements. And I think it was Jeremiah or someone this evening played an extraordinary clip from, I think it was 2012, where Trump basically said Obama, or it was the time of the Obama administration. So I need to remind myself of what the dates are around that. So that wouldn't have been 2015, I guess. But what he basically said was that Obama's going to get desperate. He's going to do anything if he feels he's going to lose the election, etc., and just watch my lips. He's going to invade Iran to try and win the election. I mean, the irony of that is extraordinary. But unfortunately, it's not irony, because Trump is almost certainly, even back then, whenever that was, more than a decade ago, he's thinking, yeah, if I was in this position, this is exactly what I do. And here he is now, and this is what he's doing.
It's hypocrisy. It's not only irony, it's hypocrisy.
It's hypocrisy, but it's also he's the Bond villain who tells you exactly what he's going to do. He's constantly monologuing, and if you can pick that little bit of sweet corn out of the turd, you can kind of figure out how his mind works. Well, Jonathan, I want to address this thing here as well. Please. Ukraine banning Telegram. That I don't know necessarily if the person who posted it sort of is putting this as a kind of Russia's doing, Ukraine's doing it. Ukraine is going to be banning Telegram for a very different reason, and maybe this guy is fully aware of that. Maybe this is his point, I don't know. But Telegram has for a long time been suspected of having backdoors to the GRU, not being encrypted in the way that it actually claims. So Telegram is a huge strategic risk for Ukrainian operations. Absolutely right that it should be ripped out, banned, because it is a strategic vulnerability.
Yes, no, I agree. And again, I want to say that I don't think that the main reason for Trump invading Iran was to increase his popularity among MAGA, but it is to increase his popularity, to maintain his popularity, his grip on his most fervent supporters. And I also want to say at this point, getting back to America and what I pay most attention to these days, the people that keep track of this are not saying now that Donald Trump and MAGA are trying to cancel or postpone the elections in November. Not at all. What we are saying is that they want to control the elections through various means, from gerrymandering to stationing DHS and other law enforcement at the polling stations, intimidation, to actually put the poll counters in the hands of the Republican Party. So the votes are actually counted by activists, by people in the Republican Party, which is totally against not only tradition, the law. So I'm not saying, and people like myself that analyze this are not saying that Trump is trying to cancel the elections, which he did say originally. No, he's trying to control the elections to make sure that the Republicans win and that he will never have to leave office, or the Republican Party will always be in power. That's what's going on. He says this. It's part of Project 2025. And I fear, Jonathan, that they're very close to finalizing their plans to do just that.
Well, this is it. I think some of the outlines of how they perhaps intend to do this are becoming clearer. We've always felt there are many options they could employ to try to subvert, and there are options which people often forget. Even after the vote, if the vote doesn't go in their favor, there are many options they can use to try to suppress that vote, question it, put it in suspended animation,
nullify it, whatever,
nullify it, all sorts of things. Lock up the people who even counted and certified the results. So there's a huge risk both before, during, and after these processes. We know that they have been testing a number of things, including seizing the ballots from Fulton County, which really is not something they ought to be doing or are mandated to do,
overseen by
or have any justification to do. She turned up in person. That shows the strategic importance of that operation. So there's that. There's the threat that is hanging over any local officials who are involved in that process. Anyone in relating to not just counting but organizing the vote. Then there's the actual potential to harass people during voting or to deploy military in certain areas. There's the potential to spark false flags. There's the potential then to declare votes null and void. There's the potential to insist on all sorts of jumping through hoops, having to bring your passport, etc.
Seizing voting machines.
Seizing voting machines. Actually, an ardent MAGA supporter has bought up Dominion voting systems. So they have someone potentially already on the inside who's prepared to collaborate with that process. So people are saying, oh, will he try this? I'm sorry, he's not just trying it. He is putting in place multiple strands.
He's in the final lap of this plan.
He's the final lap of it. And I think the other thing in his mind, of course, is he understands in Ukraine that the voting can be suspended by their constitution in the context here. That does not apply in the US. In fact, as I think it was, did someone say it was 1952 or something, or Truman during Korea tried to, extend his powers to suspend, I think it was a steel workers strike during the Korean War.
He tried to seize to nationalize them, actually.
Tried to seize and nationalize, and he was struck down. He was saying you don't have those powers, even in the context of war. So, Trump, I think, is probably unaware of the absolute limit on his powers. But what he will always do is push against that. Whether he perceives those frameworks or not, he'll push against it, try to maximize his power. We're going to see the system tested to destruction. We're going to see the system tested in a way that it has never been tested in 250 years. And there's the supreme irony that we're in this, important anniversary of the Republic, and yet the conception of the founding fathers will never have been put to the test. But what they were planning for, I mean, they can't have ever imagined someone like Trump, unfortunately, but they can imagine tyrants. They can imagine how, democracies would get corrupted and how the mechanics of tyranny work, because they studied their Greek and Roman history, when they were, helping to define the republic. So hopefully there's enough in there to help this democracy survive and actually vanquish the greatest threat to it. But it's not a given by any means, and
Well,
it's
yeah,
not going to survive because something written on a page. It's going to survive because enough threshold of people decide to resist it forcefully with their bodies and their minds and their words.
I'm going to give the last my last comments because we're running out of time. Although I do sound pessimistic most of the time and very upset about what's going on in the United States right now, I do believe that we will come out of this whole, not unscathed and not, well, hopefully not mortally damaged, but severely damaged as a constitutional republic, a democracy. But we will come out of this. And I say that because even though it's a large percentage of Americans who I consider to be traitors, I'm sorry, Jonathan, just out and out traitors, people who either never understood the Constitution or have chosen to put blinders on and side with fascism. Fortunately, that is only about not only, but 30 to 40% or so of the voting population. The rest of America, well, there's always about 10 or 20% who don't care about anything, but the majority of the voting population in America actually do care about this country. They do care about our constitutional republic, the laws. They care about preserving a democracy. They care about having somebody with morals and ethics in the White House. The majority of Americans, and I'm sorry, we have too long of a history of overcoming our deficiencies, of at least trying to correct our mistakes. And we've come a hell of a long way. We're nowhere near where we need to be, but we've come a hell of a long way. And when this is all said and done, the cult of Donald Trump is going to be shattered. Whether or not he sees that day when he's alive or not, I don't know. But I pray that I see the day when the entire regime, the cult regime, the cabinet, and all his sycophants are in prison, because this will not stand. There's too many Americans that believe in our constitutional republic. Like me, I'm not alone. I'm in the majority, actually, believe it or not. And this will not stand. And that's my closing comments for today.
Well, before we sign out, I strongly recommend everyone to check out David's channel, check out his Substack as well, because it comes as a revelation to me, but it seems there are some people who prefer to read rather than watch videos. I know that's not how I work anymore, although I do a mixture of both. But your Substack has some fantastic stuff on there, very thoughtful, incisive stuff about what's going on. And I should remind viewers here as well, David predicted most of this over the last 2 years, well before Trump came back into office, and of course was labeled an extremist and all sorts of other kind of stuff. But I think on many of these, you called it because you'd read your Project 2025. You picked it apart. You figured out, how they might be able to, bring this off. So, yeah, my recommendation is people should really be following you through this critical process this year.
No delusion zone, folks. No delusion zone
delusion
at
zone.
YouTube. And protectingtherepublic.com is my Substack.
That's it. It's in the description of the video. Definitely go and check that out. And never been more important than ever that we listen to voices who have some predictive power, but also have, I would say, a strong moral political framework on what's going on as part of the resistance. David, thank you for this. I know it's a Saturday night, and I'm sure we'd love to be down the boozer rather than here. But thanks for joining me. And we've got a fantastic. I think a lot of people have been watching this, and probably more so.
Yes, we've had a lot of people watching, a lot of viewership. I thank all of you. Please tune back in. We usually do this on Friday. Friday noon Eastern Standard Time. So please look in again. This is called The Dictators, a weekly live stream that Jonathan and I do. Jonathan, thank you very much. I've now been up over 24 hours. I'm going to try to get some sleep.
That's it. Well, thanks to the 4,500 who have so far watched this on Silicon Curtain, which is fantastic. Yes. And that number should double, treble, which will make it by far and away the most successful one we've done so far, and hopefully introduces your fantastic work to a wider audience. Right, we're signing out. Thank you for everyone for the brilliant comments and the generally, I would say, minimal or no real trolling today, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's a shame, but next time.